I hereby call to order the Thursday, November 16th, 2023 Town of Frisco Planning Commission meeting. Cheryl, will you please call roll?
Commissioner Forsyth.
Here.
Commissioner Lesmes.
Here.
Commissioner Kane.
Here.
Commissioner Withrow.
Here.
Commissioner Connolly is absent this evening. Commissioner Stabile is absent. He has recused himself due to a conflict of interest. Otherwise, we have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cheryl. The new minutes or the minutes from November 2nd, 2023 Planning Commission were circulated. Are there any comments, corrections, or do we have an emotion to approve? I'll make a motion. I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Can you turn up Ira's volume a little bit? All right, at this time,
I'll
I will
second it.
open the floor
Can you hear
to
me?
public comment for non-agenda items. If you are here to speak to anything that is not on tonight's agenda, now is your opportunity. Please step up to the podium, state your name, address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you're online and wish to make public comment, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. See no request for public comment on non-agenda items, so I will close the public comment portion of tonight's meeting and move on to agenda items. We have one agenda tonight, and that is MAJ-230011, a sketch plan review of the major site plan application for a new mixed-use development and preliminary public hearing for REZ-23-0002 101 West Main Housing Planned Unit Development, PUD, located at 101 West Main Street, Lot B1, West Frisco, 70 sub number 2, applicant Andy Stabile and Alan Guerrero Architecture. This time I'll turn it over to you, Katie, for the staff presentation.
Kelsey. Sorry. So as you can tell, we have a representative on the applicant side here. Lauren with NHP is going to be taking the lead when you get to the applicant's presentation. So as you saw in the staff report, this is a little bit more of a complicated application than the Planning Commission has seen in a while, because we have the rezoning to a PUD, and then we also concurrently are reviewing a sketch plan for the proposed development. Neither one of these items require a vote tonight. They're both an opportunity for the commission to give feedback and comments to the applicant, and then the applicant will address those comments and return to you with a final public hearing for rezoning and also a final major site plan application. Echoing. Okay, so getting into the actual background of the project, I know everyone is familiar with this site, so I'm going to go a little bit quickly through existing conditions. The proposal is for the property located at the intersection of Creekside Drive and West Main Street. The existing building would obviously be torn down and then the new building constructed on the site. The applicant is proposing 52 deed restricted residential units. Now, this is where part of the PUD and the affordable housing comes in. By the applicant proposing to have all of those units at a 30 to 80% AMI with some flexibility up to 100%. It not only qualifies as a affordable housing program through 185.5 in the code, but it also allows them to say, this is the community benefit we're proposing to you. So part of what the Planning Commission is looking at with a PUD is the applicant is proposing exceptions to the zoning regulations, and the Planning Commission is to consider if those exceptions are worth it for the community need, which is 52, at this point, 52 very low income residential dwelling units. So as noted in the staff report, staff does think this addresses a high community need, and I'll go through all of those exceptions. I'll let you know what staff thinks about them, but also obviously looking for feedback and discussion from Planning Commission. And at the end of the presentation, when you get to Planning Commission discussion, I can put slides back up so you can see that actual list of what we're hoping to have you really focus on, so you can kind of walk yourselves through the list. So site conditions are shown up here. On the left of the screen is the existing property, and on the right is the proposed new building. You can see there is parking in the rear of it. And then you have parking proposed on Main Street, which we'll get into that proposal as we get through this. One other part on the development is it is a mixed use zoning district is the existing zoning. The applicant is also proposing just over 1,500 square feet of commercial space. So they are proposing a residential, primarily residential dwelling units for rent. However, they are also keeping a portion of the front ground level to be for commercial uses. I'll try to encourage a little bit of commercial to still go in, most likely office is what they're thinking to be most compatible with the design of the building space. So a little bit of commercial and then a lot of residential. Another public benefit that they are proposing is a large easement in the back of the property. This would allow the town, if we wanted to in the future, put in a trail but along the 10-mile creek that is in the trails master plan is the idea in the future. And we would be able to potentially put that in if we chose to, most likely, obviously not a paved path because you're in the floodplain. But they are proposing a large public easement to be dedicated to the town in the rear of the property. So starting out, and I'm going to flop a little bit between affordable housing and the PUD. But you have your mixed use zoning district. And then because this qualifies for an affordable housing development incentive program, that part of the code allows the application to have certain I don't know if you want to call them reductions or increases based on the line item in the code, but they are already before the PUD allowed to have certain exceptions. And that is what they're proposing in their PUD also, which is in line with the affordable housing development. And then I'm going to skip over exactly what the PUD is. I do believe that you're familiar with it since we just kind of had a good discussion on that recently. Okay, so looking at the plan unit development, I'm going to break down on the next couple of slides what the applicant is proposing to have in their PUD that is different than what is allowed in the town code. And this is what staff is really hoping that the applicant will get direction from Planning Commission on tonight. If you support all of these, then they are on track to most likely have their sketch plan completely okay with maybe some details or comments you have. If any of these you don't support, then the sketch plan application will probably need to be amended because it is based on these exceptions right now. So the first one is in staff's mind pretty trivial. They are proposing a 9-foot ceiling height instead of 10 feet on the ground level. The reason that staff's understanding of why the code requires 10 feet in the mixed use district is to be able to have a more functionality for certain commercial uses such as retail and restaurant. Speaking to some architects, they actually frequently drop the ceiling height to 9 feet for office so that it doesn't have that large height that you don't usually want in an office space. So staff's understanding is that 10 feet is to allow for more flexibility in uses, and that's why it's a requirement in the mixed use district. Recognizing that these are going to be residential and most likely office on the ground level, staff is in support of 9 feet instead of 10 feet. And as I do this, do you want to comment on each now or have me go through it and comment on them all?
I think probably just with the four of us, go through it and then we can comment.
Okay. Then the next one is residential uses in central core and mixed use district. So right now, if it was by code, then the ground floor residential uses would need a conditional use. The PUD is proposed to state that ground floor residential uses are permitted by right. That is something that is allowed when writing a PUD. And so basically by putting that in the PUD, if it's approved, then ground floor residential uses would not need to have a conditional use to go on this property. And so it would be permitted right. The next one is mixture of uses in the mixed use district. And this is where the mixed use district requires a minimum of 20% commercial space on a property. The applicant, as noted, is proposing a minimum of 1,500 square feet, which is about 3.7%. Now, this can be looked at two ways. The Planning Commission and the town community can look at it as you want more office space down there. Staff had recommended support of this because we find that having these low income residential units is a strong need and that they are giving a little bit of commercial space and there is new commercial space in the vicinity of this property. So staff is looking at it as the design of the building, the funding, the financing, all going into this project is worth getting those affordable housing units on the ground floor or in the building. The next one is parking requirements. So the applicant is actually proposing parking in conformance with the town code through the affordable housing requirements. So the number of spaces is in compliance. What is they are requesting an exception for in the PUD is to allow overnight parking spaces to be on the street. And so whereas the town currently requires only 20% for affordable housing to be on the street overnight, they're proposing about 48%. Now, they have already been speaking and having meetings with Public Works. They've already proposed a parking management plan. Public Works has provided comments since the staff report went out. And the comments that have been recommended by Public Works all seem feasible and that the applicant would be able to do them. So staff is supporting the increase in overnight parking on Main Street as long as when it comes through for a final rezoning and major site plan, we have Public Works writing stating that they have a parking management plan that they support. And that includes signage. It includes times when cars cannot be parked there on certain days for snow removal and things like that. I'll let the applicant address more to those if you have questions on that. The other part of the parking regulations that the applicant is requesting the PUD to have an exception for, which is different from the code, is that the code currently allows or requires 1 visitor parking space for every 5 dwelling units. The applicant is requesting 1 visitor parking space for every 7 dwelling units. So the visitors would basically have to more park on Main Street, maybe a little bit of a further walk or on a side street or somewhere else in the vicinity if that was approved. Landscaping and revegetation requirements are proposed to be reduced. I won't read through exactly what those reductions are. I will note they're not proposing to get rid of landscaping, and because there's a lot of floodplain in the back and a large 25-foot no disturbance zone, there will be a lot of existing vegetation on this property. They also are still proposing landscaping to be in the front of the building, which staff supports and would like to have stay because that gives you a little bit of a breakup of the massing of the building to have those trees in the front. So the applicant is not requesting to not have any landscaping. They're just requesting a reduction in some of it and also to potentially have more grasses instead of shrubs. And so again, I'll let the applicant address that one in a little bit more detail if you have questions. Next one is snow storage. Snow storage, the applicant, as proposed on the site plan in the packet, is proposing enough snow storage, but similar to parking, it's not all proposed on the private property. They are proposing a section in the right of way adjacent to it, which has been identified with Public Works. They have just started discussing this just last week with Public Works, and staff is supporting this if they get an okay from Public Works. So I also want to give you a disclaimer that based on initial conversations held last week about this, the snow storage may not be allowed in the right of way where they're proposing, or they might. And so even if you supported it, we still need Public Works to support it, and it will come forward to you with an approval, written support by Public Works, whatever is in the PUD. So I'll let the applicants address that a little more. It came in as a change a little bit late, and we just didn't want to throw it off by adding it too late into getting it in the packet when it had already gotten written. And then mixture of uses in the mixed use district. I'm sorry, this is the wrong title. But this is actually on design guidelines. So because the property contains a small amount of commercial, it technically falls under non-residential development standards. The applicant is proposing in the PUD that the town allow them to utilize the design guidelines for residential design development standards. And the reason for this is that the design standards for residential are basically require essentially less cost. There's less architectural breaks. There's less basically design standards in a way. Now, as seen on the application materials, the application still shows architectural relief and breaks in wall planes and roof forms. But the applicant also is hoping to put solar on this roof. And the way that the non-residential development standards are written with so much variation in the roof forms, they find that might be difficult to do. So the initial request in the PUD is to follow completely the residential design standards instead of non-residential design standards. Staff is supporting that, but we also are still kind of playing in our heads a little, and we're happy to have Planning Commission offer feedback. Should they specifically state design standards out in the PUD or just reference the UDC non-resident or residential design standards? Like, is it okay to be all encompassing for residential? And again, there's only about 3.7% of commercial space in the building. And then we have bulk standards. This is one that staff and the applicant just were a little torn, and we didn't even disagree. We just didn't quite know how to handle it. And we really are looking for your insight and feedback on this one. So the applicant came in with the PUD to allow 1,000 cubic feet per 10,000 square feet of lot area. That is a larger bulk plane than what even the affordable housing incentives allow. Now, what staff is a little bit concerned of is that when we look at bulk plane encroachments, we look at it cannot be for livable floor space. It has to be significant architectural relief. And understanding that there's different opinions on significant architectural relief, staff looks at the bulk plane encroachments as something that probably wouldn't actually be able to be approved technically under bulk plane encroachments. So we wanted to hear what Planning Commission thought. We did propose in the staff report a couple recommendations for you to discuss and kind of hear your thoughts on. And we understand the wording may be a little bit confusing, so we're happy to clean that up a little based on your feedback. The first one that we put on there as an option would basically be allowing bulk plane as proposed, but it could include livable floor space. So bulk plane could be proposed to a certain extent, but it didn't have to just be for significant architectural features. Then the second option is, say, in the PUD, bulk plane encroachments do not apply to this property. And then the third option would be, you let us know if you have other creative ideas. And again, you do not need to support any of these, but this is kind of where staff felt like they are having architectural design and it looks good. We don't know if we really want to support it being completely removed from the property and have some far-fetched risk of square or rectangle box. But is it okay to allow a little more encroachment, even if it's to get a little bit more floor space for rental units and get more rental units in there? I believe the applicant can also tell you how many units they will lose if they follow the bulk plane as written in the code. So. All right, dimensional standards, and thank you for bearing with me. I know I'm going slow through this just to try to cover everything clearly, since it's got a lot involved in it. So density, mixed use district allows 12 units by right. The affordable housing development allows the Planning Commission can approve bonus units of any design, of any number. And so the applicant is proposing 52 units, which if the Planning Commission finds the additional units because of the structure's design, height, mass, and scale don't detract from the character and vicinity and small mountain town character, they can approve any number. So the 52 proposed would be fine. So the applicant is proposing what is allowed by affordable housing development if the Planning Commission supports that bonus density. Maximum lot coverage in the mixed use district allows 60%. Through the affordable housing development, it's 80% lot coverage maximum. And the applicant is proposing that 80% in the PUD. So they're just showing it in line with affordable housing development. So no exceptions to these that I'm going through. I just want you to see what a mixed use has, the affordable housing development, and what that has so that you're aware of it. Setbacks, you have reduced setbacks for the affordable housing development permits. I won't read them all out. I know you still are familiar with them and saw them in the staff report, but essentially the applicant is proposing to comply with the affordable housing development setbacks. Building height, the mixed use district permits a maximum of 45 feet of pitched roofs. Through the affordable housing development, it does permit 10% increase, which gets you up to 49.5 feet. I do want to give the Planning Commission a heads up that the applicant is working with the town engineer over building height because this sits in a hole. The project has the right through the code and the definition of a building height to use the street grades at the intersecting streets to be the grade that you start off of. So whereas you are also allowed to have a higher building, I do want you to be aware. So if this all goes through, you're not surprised that the height will actually be more off of the grade of the streets. and not down in that hole where it is right now. So you're looking at what you might picture, a little higher than you might picture. But what they're proposing is permitted by code. It also has to be approved, supported by their town, by their engineer, and approved by our town engineer before they even get that exception, but they're working on that with Public Works. Okay, parking, the 11 and 11 is confusing. There's 21 spots in this lot. The 21 parking spaces that are in this lot take into account that a car share spot per the affordable housing allows for 1 space equals 4 spots. And so basically you have 21 spaces here. It includes 2 ADA spaces, which are required, along with 2 car share spots. And then the applicant is proposing parking to comply with the affordable housing incentives. However, as I stated earlier, with the on-street parking being for about 48%. And that's kind of just illustrated here. As far as on-street parking, along with the parking management plan that they're working on with Public Works, they also are proposing to construct those spaces, so they would pay for that, but then the town would maintain them to continue plowing and take care of maintenance of those spaces within the right of way. I will not go over the numbers unless you, yes.
Sorry, can I
No,
ask a
you're
question while we're on this slide, just because
Yes, thank you.
I just don't understand what's happening here. So the blue spots are existing. Sorry, the 4, 11, and 5, those are new or?
Those are the new spaces.
Those are new. The 11 that's orange on the corner is existing. And all the ones across the street would be new.
So some of those are actually already constructed in front of 80 West Main.
Oh, okay.
So if you drive down there, those are the ones that's where existing parking is written. And then the applicant is proposing additional spaces in blue there across from the orange 11. Those are not part of their development, but they are saying that that could potentially be expanded into parking right there.
Okay, so the additional proposed are the 4, the 11, and 5 on the whatever side of the street,
Correct.
north side of the street. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Okay, so I'm not going to review the numbers. Staff verified them of what's proposed, and they are in compliance as far as quantity of what the affordable housing allows. Snow storage, again, as noted earlier, the snow storage is requesting, not enough is on site as shown in the current site sketch plan and PUD. If the planning commission supports it off premise in the right of way, it needs Public Works support. And then what's proposed in sketch plan would also be in compliance. If the planning commission does not support that or Public Works doesn't, then the applicant will need to find a way to show it on the property. Town isn't worried about this holding it up going forward to a full site plan because we think snow storage could be worked out if they need it, like depending on Public Works. And it sounds like they had some ideas that were going to work.
Katie,
Was
Hello,
that
Katie?
you, Ira?
and it's me, yes. The snow storage, could the proposed location, is that on the slide up on the screen now?
Mhm. So you can
That's the-
kind of see, I didn't highlight it, I just kind of highlighted the arrow to it. It's kind of that
Okay.
grid.
Got it. Okay,
2 spots are here at least that I noted.
I see it.
Okay, really quickly, just because it is something we always review with the sketch plan. The access is shown a little bit too narrow, so it has to be widened a little bit. The applicant is aware of that and they'll bring it up from 21 feet to 24 feet. A traffic study is required with this application. So prior or at the time of full site plan application, they do have to submit a traffic study to the town. Excuse me, and then that will get reviewed by the town engineer. Bicycle parking is proposed to be in compliance with the town code, as is refuse management. And then I just wanted to mention again, there is a parking management plan and a car sharing plan. They've already been submitted in draft form and they're being worked out right now with Public Works and other town staff. Little image of some of the bulk standards you can see in that kind of top left corner, back left corner is where staff finds that, in our opinion, it's not necessarily significant architectural relief for those based on how we interpret it.
Can I ask you just a
Yeah.
question about that last?
Yep.
So based on this diagram that we're looking at here, it does sort of like allude to that they could be taller. Is that, am I just reading this wrong?
No,
Like-
we have about 4 feet or under.
Okay. divided by 4. Okay, and then I have images. I'm not reading this, don't worry. This was in the staff report. This is just a reminder to you of when it gets to a final public hearing for a rezoning for an application for a PUD. There are 10 criteria that the applicant needs to meet. So basically the applicant in their final application for rezoning will have all of these in their narrative and they'll all be addressed. And then those will also be put in the staff report for you to review. So we just kind of wanted you to be aware of it and remember that there are a lot of criteria that the applicant has to show they're meeting to be able to be rezoned to a PUD. And the next is just what I already went through. I'm not going to read it, but I have these 2 slides in case you want to look at them during your discussion.
Great.
That is it.
Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
We will move to questions for the staff. Ira, let's start with you. Do you have questions for Katie?
Okay, I'm on. Katie, the 10-foot versus 9-foot ceiling height, am I to understand that all the apartments on the first floor will all be 9 foot and second and third floor will all be 8-foot ceiling heights?
I'll let the applicant address that one. I'm not positive on the second floor. So
Okay, I don't know if I can ask you. So I think when we first saw this, they were proposing underground parking. That seems to be gone. And since all that building was excavated, I don't know who answers this question. Will the new foundation be partially on fill of the old garage, or is the whole new foundation on undisturbed ground?
I'll let the applicant address if they're going underground. There definitely is not proposed to be parking anymore. And the reason that was removed from the design of this project is the cost. And is all of the financing started to be looked at by the applicant, and the fact that we really want to keep these low income. We have to keep the cost down, which led to the removal of the underground parking that was so expensive. It's also, as a side note, why they're proposing some of these exceptions to architectural design. But as far as where exactly the foundation is going to be dug and how far, I'll let the applicant address that one.
Okay. I see there's an elevator in there for the 3-story building. Is one elevator sufficient?
That would be through the building code if they are required to have it and how much. So again, I'll let the architect take care of that one too.
Okay, let me see if I find one for you. Oh, here's the
Nice.
easy one.
I love redirecting.
Yeah, right. The building, I'm certain will have internal fire sprinkler system.
Yes.
And so the parking plan or the permitted parking, are any of those spots on Main Street going to be restricted that the public cannot use them during daylight or anytime?
So for that, because I admit I wasn't involved in the most recent conversation with the applicant and Public Works where they started coming to more consensus in a clear parking management plan. I should know, I admit, but I'm going to let the applicant address that one also.
Okay. And I mean, I probably should have started off that. I really enjoy seeing this project. I mean, I'm excited to the nth degree to see this thing happen. I mean, this is a big lift with this PUD and everything else and the financing. It's very complicated, but I'm very supportive in concept and idea of the project. So that should have been my opening salvo. So my last one, and then you're probably going to defer this one too. You mentioned the solar panels on the roof that they'd like to. Is there a commitment that we get from them that they will do?
Having it in the PUD, but staff honestly didn't want to require it through the PUD. And the reason for that is across the street at 80 West Main, they found that through their solar study, it wasn't going to be feasible because of the amount of shade that property gets because of Mount Royal. And I think staff has more concerns about the feasibility of the solar panels, whereas the applicant is extremely ambitious that they're going to put them in, which is a good thing. And if they work, we want to support it, and we will, and we'd be happy about it. But we as staff really don't want to make it a requirement because we don't know if that solar study is going to show that it's going to be feasible at this property, only because of our knowledge of the property across Main Street.
Okay. I think that's what I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. Jessica, questions for staff?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So we have 52 deed restricted units that are between 30 and 80% AMI, flexibility up to 100%. Do we know how many are at which AMI? Okay, great, because I do think that, and I'm asking just because I do think it is important, you know, to approve a lot of the exceptions that are in here.
And it's a really great point that I should know, and I forget the number, I apologize, I'll have the applicant state this, but in the PUD, we did have them put a minimum commitment, I think it's 45 units, so we are through the PUD requiring that they put in a minimum of 45 units at that AMI, so that there's no wishy-washy. But I'll let them give you the breakdown.
Okay. And it's in the AMI, I bet I could probably just find it in my materials. Yeah, 45 units at
30 to 80, but a
It's a-
little bit of flexibility to 100, so
That's
the
a pretty
breakdown.
big
they need to give you,
range, 30 to
correct.
80, you could go 45 units at 80, and then
So-
you've made it.
And I-
So,
yeah, no, excellent point, and I don't know if you find the applicant has fine tuned it because of financing, a lot of it I think is gonna come into that, which is why that little flexibility,
okay,
but I.
we'll talk more about that, but yeah, it just, it, you know, because you hear 30%, you're like, oh my God, that's such a need. Sure, I can live without any commercial on this gap in Main Street that really could use some commercial for this type of pressing need, but 45 units at 80 and the rest at 100, that's kind of a different package. So yeah, and then I guess looking at these renderings, where is the, and this might be better for the applicant as well, but where is, if you can answer, where is that like office
It's in the
considered?
top picture, the front left,
Okay.
so you see those doors kind of going in.
Oh, those
that's
are
the-
doors right there. Okay. And then, I mean, this does the code define office and commercial differently? Because this really seems like we're saying commercial / office, but we really mean office.
So it says commercial, the applicant is actually narrowing it down.
Okay.
Because they don't feel like it's the best use for restaurant or things like that
Sure.
necessarily. So in the PUD, they put some more specific uses
Okay.
with a disclaimer that if I think they put staff or the director can allow a use that is similar. So if we have a future use that hasn't been considered, that is some that could be functional, it could go in there. It's not saying no to kind of new trendy uses that we might not be aware of, but they're basically trying to say in their PUD, they're not listing straight out restaurant, things like that.
Sure. Okay, and maybe they couldn't even do that with the ceiling height and the building
That's kind
code.
of what we talked about is that it would take, I did propose that question, and yes, somebody could come in with a lot of money, right? And do whatever they needed to do, make it, maybe not with ceiling height, but even with the structurals and the separations and hood requirements and things for a restaurant, it would take a lot more money.
Yeah, nearly, yeah. a
So,
lot of good
I
stuff.
want to say it could never happen, but it would be tough.
Okay, and would this be leased to the public, this office space?
I'll
That's
let
probably
the
better for
applicant
the
address. I
applicant.
don't know if that's been finalized.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's. Yeah, I think that's all I have for you. Thank you, Katie.
Questions for staff?
Just a little bit about process.
Mhm.
Because if they're, what's the need for applying for the Affordable Housing Development Incentive Program, which by the way, I like that it's become an acronym.
I couldn't stand typing it all out.
Uh,
I hope you didn't mind. I created that on the spot.
So what's the point of if you're going for that designation, what is the point of also doing the PD? Is it just because some of the stuff isn't,
Extra exceptions, correct.
couldn't you just cover it all in the PUD?
You could. You definitely could, but and yes, it's a really great point. It could just be a PUD that allows all that. And it basically is, but we also wanted to kind of show the planning commission. So it almost is also a way to go through those in that incentive program. But you are correct. It's a good point. It probably doesn't even need to be designated that way.
You can use it to compare, but okay.
Right, that it almost wouldn't need to be a designation.
But it does show that it's in line with those standards at the same time.
Yeah,
But
that's what
yes.
I mean. You can use it to compare.
But
you're
you're
doing
right. I
PUD.
don't think you have to actually approve it as affordable housing incentive program. That's a
Okay.
good point.
And the height across, the reason for the height, the 10-foot ceiling height, is this building right here.
Okay.
Because when this building's ground floor, Went
This is
below.
which building?
sorry, across the street,
Okay.
the,
Main Street.
this building
Commerce
that
building or
has
something,
ground
it's like-
floor commercial,
Main
and it's, and it's 3-story. They shortened that first floor height, and a lot of the people that started businesses there complained that the commercial didn't work with the shortened building, the ceiling height. So I remember when that happened, so that's why I'm like, no, 10 feet, but anyway.
Oh, that's a good feedback. And I think I'd encourage everyone to discuss that one, since you brought it up.
And then my other question was the solar study. Is there a reason why that hasn't been done yet?
Looking at address that, it might have been even, it just, we don't require it sketch, so I think we also didn't even ask for it on
Yeah.
our end.
Oh, one more question. So, obviously this architect is the same architect that's doing 602 Galena, and I see a lot of similarities. And I guess my question to you is, I don't know, architects do have their style, and whatever is the trending style of the day is fine. I just don't want to see the same sort of repetition. It feels really repetitive between the two projects. So whatever you can say to respond to that.
I think that's good feedback to give to the applicant. We have limitations to duplicity of buildings within the vicinity, but they're too far away to fall under that specific part of the code. So I'm trying to think if we really have a requirement within town. I'll have to double check too.
Okay.
So first thing is I want to see if we have a requirement that would actually stop it from being pretty duplicated. The second thing is I don't really know if we want to have the planning commission put in design standards for this one in the PUD, because this is the one that is going to be lower income and we want to keep it a lower cost. So we want to keep the, but I guess if you reduce the architectural design on this one and the other one is not going to be coming through with that proposed change, but it's a good point.
I just thought of another question because two more. One is, so what happens if we support all these reductions and exceptions, and then the AMIs go up, just like they did with the other project that we were talking
So
about?
that's why we had them put the PUD that has specific AMIs. And if it needs to go past what they put in there, then they have to come back and modify their PUD, which takes an approval by recommendation by planning commission and approval by town council.
Okay.
So that's kind of where staff tried to push a little bit to get that in there. Recognizing it could also become a burden to the applicant. I don't think they're super thrilled that that's in there, to be honest, but they were okay doing it when we asked.
Right.
Correct.
And I forgot my other question, sorry.
I'm here.
I'll remember it later.
Any other questions? If you remember it, let me know. I've got a couple multi-part questions. It said in their narrative that they're not allowed to abut parking to Main Street, but didn't we just approve 80 West Main to abut?
So the
Parking.
that was not required. Oh, you mean in the front of the building?
Yeah.
I don't know if Sally's familiar with that project. That's right.
Well, it said in their narrative that the design standards don't allow parking to abut up to Main Street. And when you look at the site, you're like, you'd think you'd want it on the river for aesthetics for the people inhabiting it. Where across the street, same architect, everything, they have parking at 80 West Main abutting Main Street. So I'm just a little confused.
Allowed? I'm gonna say I wasn't here and I'm not real familiar with that project, but I don't know if it's a little out of scope, but
And
the
so
applicant
is
might be
the
able to tell
parking
you.
there, though, like, cause it talked about like creating distance from the river. Is that for floodplain, like insurance, those kind of things, like to make it
Correct.
more
Yeah.
cost effective
You
in.
wanna make sure you have proper drainage and
Right.
things from runoff, yeah.
So then I'm gonna move to this trail.
Okay.
Where I think improving the trail to me seems like a cost, and then we're like cutting parking and all these other things because of cost. And then this trail master plan, you know, most of that is on private property, and it said in the master plan something to the effect of collaboration and easement. So the likelihood of this being something other than eminent domain to make a trail, it seems a little not cost effective to be focusing on putting a trail system in when we're trying to trim all these costs elsewhere. I guess maybe that's more of a comment, but is there any trail design already created? Is this a hypothetical?
There is on the adjacent property an easement. And so at first the applicant was gonna have an easement there and we said, you wanna just make it larger to give more flexibility as a public amenity. There is no design for a trail right now and it would take work because you're not allowed to disturb in there with certain exceptions. So the town also cannot just go dig. So it's more just it's in the trails master plan. If we think someday we're gonna do it, let's have an easement in place. We know it's not gonna be built on because of the floodplain in this no disturbance area.
And then I guess my final question would be, how does town feel about all these exceptions? I know you said it, but we just rewrote the code to make these projects fit. And now it seems like there's a laundry list of exceptions, and I'm like, did we not change the code enough for these projects in the future?
So I will.
Because it's
yes.
kind of slippery slope, like, hey, we're parking everybody in the right of way, and then we have non-affordable housing coming in front of us and laying down the hammer.
Yes.
And I understand we have to make exceptions for great needs. It just seems that we changed the code for this specific project, and now it's not fitting at all.
So it's true. And I think staff honestly had a hard time at first with the exceptions, but I think the timing is pretty in the applicant's favor when we just had the Summit County needs assessment come out, and it is showing that this is the need of the community, is these rental units at a low AMI, especially like 60 and 80% for the town of Frisco specifically. So because we just had this released and finalized within the last 2 months, and specifically for Frisco, this is a project at those low AMIs. And I don't know if the town is going to see any other developer come in with these AMIs, because the cost and the financing needed, and it's extremely, I mean, even now it's extremely competitive where the applicant is going to be going for LIHTC, and it's, you know, it's its own entity of applying for funding, and it's a very competitive around the state, especially. And, so town feels like, staff feels like there is a strong enough need to get low income affordable units that we do support the exceptions. And we did have to really think about it.
Is like
Yes.
offsite is very expensive. So
Correct.
it's like,
Yes.
do we lose 3 units to kind of have some of these things that make it fit? I hate to say that out loud, but for the record, it's like, we did change the code for this, and now they're not
Yes.
meeting it.
No, it's completely true. And I will also, not to sidetrack, and we're not gonna sidetrack, but I will give you a heads up that at your next planning commission meeting, you will have a public hearing on modifications to the affordable housing 5.5 that are being proposed by town staff due to some lack of clarity as we try to read it and interpret it. And we want to get those cleaned up before other projects come forward. It has nothing to do with this project. It's not connected to this project, those proposed changes. But we just, while it's in our heads, you're actually, even though it was just written, and maybe it's different staff blame me for coming in and having some difficulties reading it, it's also other projects coming through with some difficulty meeting those needs. And you may decide you want to keep that how it's written, but we're bringing it forward for a discussion also.
Because parking is, yes, we have at some stage, is it reliable? Is it easy to go to Walmart and grab these things? To say these people don't have cars, I think is a generalization. That a lot of people do have cars here, and, I hate to create new problems by solving problems. And, I think Main Street corridor with these 2 projects is a great opportunity that you can utilize those off-street parkings. When you get into the residential neighborhoods though, and you don't have that infrastructure there, I think that's where you're like, you can't create these precedents if
Correct.
the condition isn't there to support it.
Correct. And I would agree completely. And I think all of staff would, like, we are not supporting changes to the code for this project. And that's why we're not, because that's why we suggested the applicant go the PUD route, which actually wasn't even discussed when we were doing the PUD. It wasn't even a consideration. It came up after that as they started to really look at their financing and how to make the construction cheaper, basically, to get the financing to work. So would staff support this in the residential area? Probably not. We're supporting it because of the low income, and we're rental units, and we're supporting it because we're requiring Public Works to be okay with the parking and the snow storage. And the snow storage is of now, and probably will not be in the future, allowed more than the adjacent right away. We're not, because there is no plan or security right now for the future on another lot, and we would require that if like other communities do that. So I agree with, like, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I spent a while, I really broke these down, because staff is saying we support them, but we need to hear what you think.
Where I feel like what Lena questioned of, like, these AMIs need to be solidified, that they're gonna be low, and we can support that by giving all these incentives. We've got to have guarantees. And my final question is, can this commercial space be utilized as the childcare that is supposed to be a part of these projects?
So
Or does that not fall under the use by
I
right?
don't know about the financing part of that. However, I can tell you that through the state licensing, as we looked into childcare and other properties, it would be very difficult to have childcare with residential units, because it's basically the same property. And because of licensing, you can't have all these people coming in and out of the property where childcare is without having background checks and stuff. Now, that's my initial understanding. I'm reverberating what I think I have understood. So don't quote me on that, but I would say, no, this is not gonna work for childcare on this site.
Is there any tool in the kind of code that they could maybe limit some of the bulk encroachments by taking away the commercial? Like, it doesn't seem like the commercial, because to me, the commercial element in this product creates a liability. Like, what's the vacancy rate right now in the West Main Professional Building? I know a number of tenants moved out because they knew there was changes coming on the horizon, but it's like, if there's a vacancy in there, what happens to the overall complex, the health of it, where it's like, I'd rather see no commercial for this product, less encroachments or whatever, and that, is there a tool there that they could?
I don't think the applicant would be upset if you made that recommendation. When it did get discussed informally at town council, as far as just general questions on the site through the development agreement process and other processes, the council even seemed like they were a little bit split on if they thought commercial should go in here or not. The applicant is proposing it, and they can address this during their comments, if I'm incorrect. It's basically as a way to try to appease the town a little bit, because they didn't know how the town would feel about taking out all commercial for where you're required to have 20%.
Great. Any other questions?
Yeah, I remembered my question. Sorry. Well, could that space be used for the Colorado Workforce Center? Isn't there a question around?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then can you super quickly, this should have been my first question. Can you talk about, we saw this at Sketch once before, right?
Staff had it come back under a new number, partly because of the time that has lapsed, and also because it's so different. And we didn't want with the removal of the parking garage, the addition, now the rezoning, you had 2 conditional uses before instead of a PUD. So we had them start from scratch with applications.
Got it.
Yeah, you did see a sketch, but it was a very different project.
It was laid out kind of, well, anyway, okay. That's it. Thank you.
Jessica?
Yeah, sorry, follow-up question. I know when, people buy housing, it says, say if it's restricted to 100% AMI, that's the price. But then I think the housing deed restriction guidelines let that, whoever's moving in there earn 30% more, 20% more. Is that correct?
You're gonna hate this answer. It depends on the covenant. Our standard covenant right now, and we are looking at bringing this forward to council to discuss to see if the town is still likes our standard covenant this winter. But the standard covenant right now that people can opt into allows for the income level within the town of Frisco boundary employment. And then after 30 days, you can have a higher income level and go outside of the town boundaries. Now, these covenants, we plan on being different, especially because there's a lot of requirements if it goes through LIHTC. And so the applicant I think they already submitted a draft covenant, and it is different than ours. So to answer your question, our standard one is not written the way you said, but other ones are.
Right, just because I'm looking at, I think that table in the PUD, and it basically says like restricted to 50% AMI, and that family can earn no more than 50% AMI. So it's
I don't think LIHTC would let a flexibility and increase
Yeah.
in the eligibility.
I just already see, I don't know, if you can earn no more than 50% AMI, you're making less than $20 an hour for one person. And I just don't know if yes, there are people in Summit County that do earn that, but I imagine, we might see the applicant come back and say, actually, we need to go 60% AMI because of this LIHTC clause. So just kind of pointing that out, I guess.
And I think it's worth, even though it's not, obviously the financing isn't part of what the planning commission has any review of or comments. However, the discussion of the AMIs, because that is a big chunk of what they're proposing as a community benefit to get these exceptions, is something that's really important for the planning commission to understand. So the applicant will focus in a little bit. I would encourage the applicant to focus in more on that for you. So, yeah.
Any additional questions, Ira? I don't think so.
I'm good.
All right. At this time, we will close questions and move on to the applicant's presentation. I believe we have Lauren and Suzanne and Megan and a whole team here. So please come up to the podium, state your name, whoever is presenting this evening.
I line up for presentation here.
I'll wait till my presentation's pulled up for everyone online. All right, thank you. For the record, my name is Megan Teston. I'm with Norris Design. And I just wanted to start off by saying I genuinely and our team genuinely appreciates the support Planning Commission has given to this project and to affordable housing and the dedication that it takes to reach these types of goals. Workforce housing is very nuanced and it's difficult. So we really appreciate your patience and your commitment. And we also should appreciate your patience being the first project to try to use a brand new code. Every time you write code, you need to work with it and change it to reflect the reality of what the intent of the code is. And really what the intent of this code really was to get this type of AMI in the right places in our town. And we feel what we're proposing is consistent with that intent. Now, every site is unique and every project is unique. Which is why we're actually switching to a PUD for this project, as you guys had a really good discussion on already. It's really hard to have a code that applies uniformly to every circumstance, yet at the same time, you don't want to change code for one project, which is where we are now. The PUD is written to provide design flexibility where it's appropriate and to still follow the intent of the code. So that's something that we are just really thankful that you're willing to look at with us, particularly, again, something as nuanced as affordable housing. There's so much that goes into how and why things have to be, and we're going to do our best to walk you through that. And with that, I'm going to let Lauren take over.
Thanks, Megan. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Lauren Abioli. I'm a Senior Acquisitions Director with the NHP Foundation, and I'm joined tonight by not only Megan, but also Brett Ruby, a development project manager from NHP Foundation, and I believe Neil Drogenair, our senior vice president, is also joining by phone. And we also have with us our architect, Suzanne Allen Sabo. Oh, she's right there. So yeah, I just want to echo Megan's thanks. We are before you again for a sketch plan review of 101 West Main. So we came in the summertime, and if you recall, we had a plan that included structured parking. And as we refined our design and we got updated pricing based on those refinements, and we looked at the full cost of that parking, it became really clear that that approach was infeasible for affordable housing. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and figure out how we could bring the cost of the development down in order to hit these AMIs that we really, from a mission standpoint, want to hit. And so by changing this development program to surface parking, we've saved like $3 million in the total development cost here, and can bring this back into the realm of a project where we can hit these AMIs and make it competitive for the funding that's that Katie has been alluding to. That's really one of the most impactful funding programs that we have available, which is the low-income housing tax credit. I think everybody's probably seen this slide if you've seen us present on 101 West Main before, but it's been updated with the 2023 housing needs assessment numbers. And I think it underscores what folks were alluding to a few minutes ago, which is that there is a growing mismatch between the housing need and the supply. And that's really being driven by a lot of forces that are, kind of business as usual. And so I think the solution, if it's going to really address this growing need, it can't be business as usual. So again, I just want to echo Megan and say thank you for working with us as we try to figure out what needs to happen on this site to serve who we want to serve. Thank you. So for anybody watching, or for those who might listen in later and are unfamiliar with the NHP Foundation, I'm just going to give a really brief overview of who we are. So we are a nonprofit affordable housing developer, owner, and operator. We have nearly 10,000 units across 16 states, and our goal is to provide safe, high quality housing and resident services for low and middle income people. And for the last few years, we've been engaging with people in the community here in Frisco and in Summit County. There we go. On the problem of the lack of affordable and available housing and brainstorming solutions to that problem. And so this development at 101 West Main is one of the results of that effort. We are seeking to provide 52 units of long-term income restricted rental housing here in partnership with the town. Though our priority is workforce housing, we have heard over the last, several months talking about this site with both Planning Commission, Town Council, and people in the community that there is a desire for non-residential space at this end of Main Street. And so, we've continued to try to include as much space as we can that's non-residential in this development. And you've seen and we've talked about that's around 1,500 square feet in this current plan. And I just want to talk a little bit about why that is. Oh, and before I get off the slide, I just want to mention that as part of this partnership with the town of Frisco that we have a development agreement with them that we have entered into for both this site and 602 Galena that will require long-term affordability restrictions on both of these properties, and that must reflect what we decide we want to build on these properties when the planning process is done. We have to commit to that number of units, those bedroom mixes, those AMIs in that development agreement.
I have control of this, so let me know whenever you want me to go.
Okay. Yeah, this is right. So as Katie mentioned, we plan to finance this development with competitive low-income housing tax credits. It's a federal tax credit program administered by a state agency, the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, or CHFA, and they require us to identify and secure any funding for non-affordable housing uses prior to application. And that would be February 1st. So the 1,500 square feet is what we believe to be financeable before the application's deadline, as well as allows us to continue to have that minimum threshold of units that we need to hit to finance this affordable housing project and then operate it effectively. And I can talk a little bit about our vision for who we see going into that office space. We have been talking with the workforce office that's currently housed at 602 Galena about this space. Have shown them the plans. They believe that the site is adequate to meet their needs, but they're also really excited about co-locating and sharing space with kind of like-minded service providers like WIC or local groups like FERC. And so we're working through that with them and with the town to identify businesses, organizations that could use that space that could be a value add for the residents of the development and also for the neighborhood and the wider community. Another thing about the tax credit program is that it's highly competitive and it requires zoning approvals and entitlement approvals to be obtained ideally before application, but really, as quickly as possible after that, so that CHFA can feel confident that it's a shovel-ready project. And so we do have, I guess, a pretty aggressive schedule that we've been working on with the town to get through the PUD and site plan process. So again, we thank you for your attention tonight and for your consideration of this development or these applications and for continuing to work with us as we find the program that works best, both from a financial feasibility standpoint, but also from a development standpoint and ensuring that we provide the kind of development that the community can really benefit from. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Megan.
Thank you. All right, so I'll flip through this. We all know where this current site is. I do always like to kind of look at site context. You'll see the inner orange circle is about a half mile and the outer one's a mile walk from the site, and it encompasses so much of town. I think it's kind of a powerful graphic in terms of getting people to live where they work. Okay. And then just again, looking here where the bus stops are and where you can get from those bus stops, it is very, very well served on our existing transit line. You can get to the transfer center easily, you can get to Copper Mountain in a number of minutes. We think this is a real big asset to people that will be living here. All right, now I'll get into some of the fun stuff like parking. I think Katie did a great job doing the overview though, so I'll spare kind of talking through the car share and the ADA units and the on-site parking. You'll see with this site plan, really what we tried to do too is to meet the intent of the code to have the building kind of hold the corner of Main Street and continue that architectural pattern from Main Street all the way through to West Main, which right now definitely breaks up, but we're hoping as more developments come on, it seems more cohesive in general. And then looking at parking, again, one of the things we really thought, and some of the things like the snow storage ask, come to the fact of we wanted to put as much parking as we could on this site because we feel that is still a value rather than like, oh, we can't park it because we can't have snow storage. So that's why we're really grateful that we're working with Public Works to find snow storage. We do think we'll probably end up on site, kind of in the back area. I don't have my clicker. This feels weird. But just right behind where you pull in to drive. We only need about 600 square feet more on site, and Public Works feels pretty confident that that would be a good location for it without actually utilizing the right of way. So that's their latest recommendation, and we will continue to talk with them. So that's how they feel is this problem will be solved. And then the PUD request, again, you put it right on. What we did was we wrote a PUD that paralleled as much of the affordable housing incentive program as we could. And then just looked for what else on top of that we would need to make this particular project work. So you'll see number 1 through 4 follow almost exactly what is written in the current affordable housing. Number 5 is the biggest deviation, and that had to do with the 20% cap of on-street parking and how we felt for this project in order to meet these needs. Moving beyond that 20% was it's the biggest ask in this PD. I mean, there's no use denying it. That's really why and what drove a PUD as opposed to just amending code. We don't think that that code should be amended everywhere, but for this project, we're asking for that relief. Number 6 is kind of like we mentioned that public easement in the back would be a benefit. Landscaping in the right of way is another benefit. And just looking at preparing a few more parking spaces on Main Street that don't exist that would not be required for this project as another benefit. 9 actually, not just a few more, so 9. And then the bulk plane and the design guidelines, that really comes from building costs and trying to keep that low and maximize the number of units. And I did talk about snow storage already. All right, so this is that graphic cleaned up a little bit so that the south side of the street doesn't read as much as it's part of this plan. You'll see the 11 that are highlighted that are in a kind of yellowish golden color. Those are existing that we would like to be using for this project. And then the 4, the 11, and the 5 that are in the navy color will be proposed parking spaces to be built in tangent with this project for a total of oh, sorry, I don't know why I blanked on that. For a total parking of 52 spaces, where 43 of them would be required. So there'd be 9 additional spaces on street that are not necessarily claimed as any part or any actual attachment to this project, if that makes sense. And again, just another look at kind of comparing what was in the code versus what we're proposing with this PUD, and we meet all the requirements. It's just a matter of where. So more of them are moved on street. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne to talk more about architecture.
We only have one project.
I know. Sorry, guys.
Suzanne Allen Sabo with Allen Garrett Architecture. Thank you, Planning Commission, for being here tonight. I know we barely made a quorum, so thank you. Appreciate it. And Ira, thank you. Again, since the last time you saw this project, we were able to reduce costs in numerous ways. Some of those included minimizing articulation a bit. We removed the parking garage and cut literally millions of dollars out of the project. So hopefully it can get built. building height, I'm just gonna answer people's questions and not go through my little speech because everybody's covered everything. So building height is currently 4 feet under the allowed 49.5 building height, which is under the Affordable Housing Incentive Program. We feel our aesthetic of this building is very appealing, given, the constraints of affordable housing, and I think our material board really reflects that. And if you guys want, we can pass that around. We're using diamond coat siding, which is similar to a hardy board, but I think it's more beautiful. I think it's a nicer product. And then, some metal siding, we're using asphalt shingle roof and some metal roofing. We currently have a mix of gables and shed roofs. And I think, part of the reason it looks so similar to the other project, Lena, is, because we use the same program. It's one program we use, and we have certain materials we pull in for that program. But I think the next time we come, we will bring Galena Street as well. We'll have one site that has Galena Street and this, and then you can see the differences. The site is considerably different, and the site design, this is a whole L, and with part of that L just right on Main Street. So I feel confident that they're gonna look significantly different. Regarding the bulk plane, we currently have 3,217 cubic feet of bulk plane encroachment, which is allowed for our proposal on the PUD. We're less than the 3625 that would be allowed. Ceiling height, I wanted to address. The reason we aren't going with 10-foot ceilings right now is, it's again a cost. We're dealing with a builder. The builder's giving us pricing and he's giving feedback. And when you go 10-foot ceiling there, really, you can't really have steps in the hallway above. So you just go 10-foot for that whole floor. So all those apartments would have 10-foot ceilings, and there's just it's an increased cost, more drywall, more framing lumber, to do that. So that's the reason we had it at 10-foot ceilings. And then the builder really felt like that was a significant cost savings. So, and each cost savings adds up. So that's why we did that. The grade, if you have questions about that, I can talk about that. Regarding, Kelsey, you were talking about pushing the building to the back from the street.
Yeah.
Our issue here is that we have a 100-year floodplain, and then there's a 25-foot setback from that. And that's kind of defining the back edge. We're just barely off of that with the back edge, enough to build the building without being in that setback. So that's why it's pushed to the location that it's at. And that plus, we were, trying to work with the planning staff who felt like it was nice to have the building up against the street. So
Yeah. I was just wondering from an aesthetic, like if, you're living there, you'd rather be on the river than on the main street, but I get it for them.
But anyway, so I just wanted to address everybody's comments, and if you have other questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much. Great presentation. Lena, do you have questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so there's no rock on this building, or is there?
There is, and I didn't glue it to the board. And
Okay.
it didn't make it down here.
Okay, so
Sorry, I'll bring it to the final.
No, I was just curious because I was looking at this and I didn't, so yeah. So there is rock on the ground floor.
We want to kind of architecturally define that. If you look at that sort of southwest corner where we have the commercial space, we wanted to make that a different material. And then we did pull a little bit of stone, as you can see on that gable, this far to the right, to kind of give it balance. But we really wanted people to understand this is a different use. These are different materials. I think we talked about that on 9097 across the street, 80 West Main. And that, planning commission really wanted to see some definition of that commercial space. And I think we have achieved that here.
Yeah, and from an aesthetic perspective, I really like it, but I feel like rock always goes away from a affordability
Yeah, I
perspective.
think we have so little when we calculate how many square feet we have of that. The builder wasn't concerned about it. I mean, we're not wrapping the whole building. It's nowhere but in these couple spots. So I don't think it will go away. If we keep the commercial. Now, if I don't know what's gonna happen if we don't. So I'll have to rethink what we're doing there. What else did
I'm sorry why the parking's not sinking in. I wonder if you could explain that just one more time, Megan, because I don't know why I don't get it.
Sure. Do you have that slide with the colors?
Yeah, this slide. And I guess my question is, you said something about, you used the word preparing parking spaces. And
Yeah.
I don't understand what that means also.
Building, proposing them, they would be.
You're not
built.
gonna build, you are gonna build.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting.
The yellow and the blue, I guess.
There's
that-
not there. Like if you walk down Main Street right now, those 11 spots are there.
Build those in. Okay, and then are those reserved for the residents of this building?
That is something we're working out in the draft management plan. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I think as part of the packet, there is a proposed framework for putting together a parking management plan, which Katie alluded to. We've talked through what that includes with Public Works, and we'll be incorporating their comments and providing an officially approved final plan when we come back to you. But basically, the idea is, and this was Public Works' comment, and I think it's a really good one. The parking spaces that are closest to the proposed building would serve the residents of that building as the on-street parking that's meeting the parking requirement.
If you get a chance, cut the
One sec.
Brussels sprouts in half.
You need to. I think you might have to say, sorry about that.
And then the parking spots furthest away would be the new public parking that would not be restricted for use only by the residents of the development. And the way that we've thought about implementing this parking management plan is to have all of the parking spaces that serve the development permitted. Property management would monitor those spaces and tow anyone that was improperly parked that didn't have a permit or was there during snow removal periods, which would be signed and posted at all the parking spaces. There would be requirements in all the leases. We already do this on a lot of our, well, probably all of our properties around what you can park there. So it has to be an operable vehicle. Public Works had comments about making sure it wasn't an oversized vehicle or, trailer, RV, anything like that. And those do become lease violations and they're treated like any other lease violation. So residents will have to comply with those requirements.
So. Okay, so I'm super clear. What you're saying is those 11 parking spaces, if I want to park in them at any given time, I can't.
They would be permit parking for the residents of the building. That's
But
right.
it's more than just the 11, right? It's the 11, the 4. I think that it's confusing the way that it's color coded. Like, I think it's just better if you say like, this orange is for the building. And then the blue is what we're building above and beyond, because that's what's unclear to us, I guess.
Yeah, I think.
So what do you?
Above and beyond, and they'd be the ones to the far.
Okay,
So we're recouping the 11.
so,
We're recouping the 11 and then there's an extra 5
so
that would be available to the public, to anybody.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what we would do likely, and this is something maybe Katie could weigh in on. I think we'll have like a revocable license agreement with the town to be able to use the existing parking spaces and then the additional 20.
yeah, I just feel this is a little misleading, like, right? Like you're saying that these 11 spaces that anybody can park in, now only residents of this building can park in, which I get. And then, we're gonna build out some more parking spaces. So actually Main Street's gonna be at like -2 parking spaces. And I just say what it is. That's all I'm saying on this. Right?
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Are you saying that these 20 parking spaces, no,
It's negative.
20 of them,
20?
all of them are for the project and required to be in the project. Those will all be permitted, minus 9 of these will be additional.
It gets even a little weirder because 3 of those are for the office, so they wouldn't be permitted. So if you're looking at what's permitted,
It's the
it's
office.
actually because 3 of the office space ones are on street, right? Because you require 3 parking spaces for those office spaces. Well, it's 4. You're right. Rounding. 4 office spaces. So we'll make this more clear, but essentially you'll have 9 that have nothing to do with them. 4 of them we're counting as part of this office thing, but they won't be permitted. And then the rest of the on-street spaces will be permitted. So you're actually at a net.
No, because we have 11 currently, and then we'll only have 9. So real reality is we're losing 2 parking
No.
spaces.
That's the weird part because of the office spaces. So you're not actually in the negative because of those won't be permitted. There's just gonna be 4 spots for the office. So it's like the 9 plus the 4.
But then those 4 then not for parking at night.
Yeah, they're not.
So you wouldn't be able to park overnight in those.
Right, they would not be part of the permit program for the residential, but they're required of this project. So I understand now how confusing this is if you haven't been staring at it for a long time.
I still don't get it. So are you saying that
Okay, so let me.
are all of these parking spaces gonna be, except for the 4, are they all gonna be permitted parking?
13 won't.
13 will not. Thank you.
Which ones?
The ones further to the east is what we're thinking with Public Works right now.
Because you got the 9 new ones and then the 4 for the commercial.
Yeah.
So currently there's 11.
Yes,
There will be 13 non-permitted.
exactly. So net to general public benefit from what's there existing today. And the rest would be permitted. Yeah.
All day,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
That's what Public Works is leaning towards right now. I think that that's still very much in draft form, but that's currently their recommendation on the parking management plan.
And the ones shown as in this slide as potential potential expansion. That's just saying,
That Public Works would like to see in terms of adding even more additional parking spaces that are not permitted. They're not currently part of this project, but that was something that when we talked with them, they we were like, you could also add parking here, and they're like, oh, that's a good idea. We should. So.
And that
but you guys aren't proposing that and the town's not really proposing to build it anytime soon.
Have you worked out?
No, that's not really, I don't know the answer to that yet.
And all of this lies on Public Works, I mean, the thumbs up.
Yes.
This entire application lies on.
It's a lot of pressure.
Now, with that said, I can definitely say I saw the public work comments on the draft plan and everything in there seemed very doable for the applicant to address.
Should be with.
And we
us,
wouldn't
so
bring
we
it
know
forward to you if
we're
Public
correct.
Works was like, no, like it actually looks like it is on track to have an okay plan from Public
Because I
Works.
mean, ultimately, you don't want the residents being towed and having a $500 bill. And then you don't want them to show up, have no parking, and then they get towed somewhere else in town, I mean. It has to be clear, and it's clearly not clear.
I think it'll be clear in practice. I just think,
Yeah.
there's just some misleading statements on here.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. And the color codings.
The color coding's back,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, guys.
It's all good. Good conversation.
I see how confusing it is now that like we're backing out of it.
And what we talked about with Public Works was designating each parking spot, like, is this for residents only? Is this the office? Is this the public? Is this new? Is this existing? So we'll have that breakdown, kind of parking space by parking space, to be very clear.
And I imagine that the interior parking space is obviously just for the residents or their guests, but
Have you looked at the right of way next to the parking spot? Is there not room to add parking in that right of way?
We did look at that. Yeah, thank you, Megan.
Good question.
We did look at that and that's something that, to be honest, it is still in discussion with Public Works on. That's technically bike path right there. So we would have to go through a process to no longer have that be bike path. They do think that's a feasible option, but it's not.
Just seems
shown
more
right
likely
now.
that you're gonna get residents only
I
to
don't
park
know.
there than
Yes,
on
so-
the main.
Frisco Citizen of Atlas parking. It's a bike path that then ends, so.
Yeah.
yeah.
Other questions?
Is it my turn? No, I think we have a number of questions that ta-
To,
yeah,
for the-
you wanted, that you had, or that we wanted the applicant to, and I don't remember what they are.
Yeah, I guess, so it kind of sounds like, all right, you know, we need to have this commercial space because we're on Main Street. There was angst about this being entirely residential, so we're gonna have commercial space. I just want, if it is gonna be part of it, to really be successful commercial office space, not just there because it's, you know, to make it suitable and palatable. So I guess, you know, I get it. Do you think that it is viable office space?
Yeah, it's always been our priority to make this site function for workforce housing. And I think it functions better and better for workforce housing for a number of reasons. The more area is dedicated to workforce housing. So to the extent we could have less commercial space, that would work out better for the project. It would make it more competitive for the tax credit financing because there wouldn't be this sort of extra non-tax credit eligible use that we have to make Chaffa feel comfortable is really going to happen. We would save costs on having to condo the building. There's a lot of like legal costs that go into doing that. And then it helps us avoid some of these questions about ceiling height, about the residential versus non-residential design standards. And frankly, we could turn those into 2 more units and help 2 more households in Frisco who need housing. So this is us trying to sort of balance the competing priorities. We know that the town, or we've heard folks in the town say that they have, but I think from our perspective, this will be a more successful development if it is dedicated to workforce units.
Would they need a conditional use if it
Not if
was?
it's in the PUD.
Okay. Do you think it's, I know that your focus, sorry, I'm just gonna push back a little bit. I know your focus on this is housing and the application and the LIHTC grants, it's very competitive and making this work. Do you think that as designed, it's functional for office?
Yes, in that, you know, we showed it to the workforce office. They said that, you know, it would meet their needs. And I think the size is actually what we're seeing people want in the market. But I will say that there's not a lot of activity in the market right now. I was talking with our broker today, and in looking at what's happening, small offices up to 200 square feet are renting really slowly, and anything above that is practically not moving at all. There are 12 active properties on MLS right now, but their average days on market is 192 days.
Commercial properties?
Office. And then
Office.
if you add in retail, it looks like it's 24 properties on market. So, you know, this is something we're going to have to try to explain to our tax credit investors and get them comfortable with. And I think one of the ways we would have to do that is by identifying a tenant like the workforce office or the town of Frisco and getting them to commit not only to the financing, as I've already mentioned, but, you know, to being in the space, because it's not a really robust office market that our lenders are going to feel really comfortable with.
I also, I mean, we can have this discussion all day long, but I think the commercial component is important because we've made mistakes on Main Street, allowing the purely residential component. It ruins the rhythm that the street needs to have if it's gonna work as a commercial artery of our town, really. So that's it's like, if you're proposing a fully residential building, build it in a residential district, not on Main Street. So, sorry, that's just how I feel
No,
about it.
yeah, this has been a lot of my angst with this whole project is that lack of commercial and that connectivity, and this being Main Street and this being really like a gap in that commercial activity. And then also looking to say, oh my God, how much do we need housing? We need this
Yeah.
project. And so it's like, for me, I'm really personally torn. And then I see this like very small amount, and I can tell that you're doing it to like balance these competing issues that we all have. But my question was, you know, is it going to be functional as designed? But, and you can't answer that. You already gave a great answer, and I appreciate what you did. So, but yeah, that's my overall.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Lena.
I hope that will help your angst. But you know, I think this one site, this one building, it can't be all things to all people. And what we're hearing the most need for is housing. And I do think that having housing for workers on Main Street will help the other businesses on Main Street, because for the last few years, we've been hearing about businesses being unable to maintain their normal hours of operation because they can't staff up adequately. And so I do think in an indirect way, this can help Main Street stay a vibrant commercial corridor. And I also think that the design of the building, pulling it up to the street, is going to help with that lively, walkable pedestrian feel that we all want to see, and provide a lot more people over there. Which, you know, today after 5 o'clock, when that office building closes, there's really not a street like that in the corners.
Sure.
Yeah, it does provide a lot of, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, I guess other follow-up questions. It sounds like you're working with Public Works to use kind of the rear of the property for snow storage. I'm just noting a concern, you know, if there's a trail that's built one day, there's trail easement. If you have a ton of snow from the whole winter season, that doesn't melt out for a while. So that to me is at least a conflict with that potential trail. So just something to note as staff and you all in Public Works talk. And then question, and if you could go over that AMI breakdown of what is proposed. And, you know, I think, you know, when I asked earlier, you know, how feasible is it really to have units at that 50% AMI in Summit County when there is that really rough, really like tight deed restriction saying that, you know, you can't earn more than this, or you basically can't have this housing, right? That's my understanding of the deed restriction.
Yeah, so I'll start there. And I think the towns, we should understand all the different affordability restrictions that are going to be on the property. So CHAFA, the agency that provides the tax credits, as part of that federal program, they have to put an affordability restriction on the property. That will run the land for the length of the affordability period. That's separate from the towns. And under the tax credit program, you actually can have income growth, because it's not the intent of the program to penalize people for growing their incomes. So you can stay in your unit and renew your lease, even if your income starts to exceed the cap that you originally, you know, had when you rented the unit. I think it can go up to like 140 or 160% of AMI or something.
I understand that. So
Yeah, so there is that stability built into that program. I think with the town of Frisco, we have the opportunity, since the affordability covenants and deed restrictions that seem to be most common deal with for sale units. We have the ability to think about what this affordability covenant needs to include to allow people to grow their incomes and not have to immediately move or not be able to renew within, you know, a certain threshold. And then related to the specific AMI mix, we are required to have 60% AMI maximum for the average of all the tax credit units under the tax credit program. We want to hit a variety of income levels because we see a lot of need. I mean, the first slide with the housing needs assessment, you saw need across multiple income bands. As we get new market data, so we had a market study last year that showed like no need at 60%, but your housing needs assessment is newer than that and definitely shows need. The numbers might get refined a little bit, but I can commit that as a tax credit project, the average would be 60% AMI, and they would range from 30% to 8%. When we come back to you for final approval, you know, we're going to have a little bit more. We're going to know what we're submitting to CHAFA. We're going to have that modeled, and we can talk about those numbers as like, you know, written in pen versus pencil. What we've been looking at is about 44% below 60 and the remaining 38 at 80. And that's speaking to the point that you're making right now, which is a lot of the employers pay, you know, $20 an hour or something equivalent to that. So we're trying to find what will be most impactful for Frisco based on the latest data, like the housing needs assessment, and also make sure that we're following the requirements of this program.
And sorry, just to follow up on this, this is one of those deed restrictions that doesn't limit your place of work to town of Frisco, correct? You can be,
The tax credit program deed restrictions cannot
Yeah.
do that, yeah.
County.
and that's for all of the 52 units in this building. Okay.
And it's restricted in perpetuity, is that correct? Via another covenant or a different covenant?
Yeah, with the town. So we didn't talk too much about that, but this is one of the projects that we're working in partnership with the town on and is covered by that development agreement so that they will be restricted in perpetuity and, excuse me, owned likely by the new housing authority or the town. The property when it's complete. Any other questions? That's good.
I don't think for me. Thank you.
Ira, any questions for the applicant?
I've been sitting pretty quietly, don't you think?
Yeah, good to hear.
So I'm listening to this discussion of the commercial units in the building. And my question to the applicant is, if you had a clean slate, would you want to have either of those two office spaces?
No, I'll restate what I said a minute ago, which is our priority is workforce housing here, and that's what we've always wanted to
Okay,
build on this
so
site.
as Bennett Cerf would say, I'll take that as a no. What I would say is the continuum of Main Street and the commercial aspect of it. I personally don't think those two gratuitous office spaces make a difference. On the other hand, I do think that if a residential project of this scope were proposed in a residential zone, we would be fighting NIMBYism to the nth degree. So I kind of think that if I could, because people are making comments, it hasn't all been questions. You answered my question about the office space. So I would say we're making a PUD and it's a clean slate. I would take the commercial out. That would be me. And I just think the building would work better. We'd get more units, and that's what we're trying to do. I don't think the corner of Main and Creekside with this large residential project would change the commercial continuum of West Main, especially with across the street, they're adding all those commercial units that are not yet open. And beyond it, more westerly, where the Summit Daily is, they've had vacancies there for a long time. So I don't see this pressing need to provide a commercial aspect to the building. So that being said, let me go back to construction question I asked before. It looks to me, or is this new structure going to be sitting in any space on top of Phil where the old building used to be?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ira, I forgot your question. So because of that giant hole, some of the building will be on fill, some will not. So yes, we'll have structural fill under some parts of the building.
Okay. What about EV parking for cars? Any EV spot there?
Yes, we have that.
Oh, because I didn't see it on your pretty drawing.
We have 2 spaces. And it's on site.
Okay. And this diamond coat siding, that's not like a hardy plank. This is a wood product, right?
Oh, what? Say that again. I'm sorry, Ira.
The diamond coat siding, that is an engineered wood product, not a cement board.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then you did say that you're working to come up with a way to not disincentivize people from making more money, because if people start making more money, they get ejected from the building, right?
Not until they make above a certain threshold. So there's the ability to have bit of income growth, but then once you can kind of afford what's in the market, then people would be unable to renew. No one would get
Okay.
evicted mid-lease for
Okay.
income growth.
And then I don't want to reopen the can of worms of parking, but I think you spoke mostly and exclusively about the parking spots on the north side of Main Street. And then I think in your drawing, it shows that you're going to help develop some parking spaces on the other side of Main Street. Is-
I think our graphic is confusing in many ways, and this is one of the ways. The existing parking on the south side is part of the new development that's going in, and we wanted to provide a full picture of kind of what parking would look like on Main on both sides.
I see.
The potential expansion noted on the south side at the intersection, those are not currently, they don't exist now, and they're not part of 80 West Main. And we identified that as a spot that additional public parking could be built in the future, and Public Works agrees with that, but we are not proposing that as part of the development of 101 West Main.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Other than that, I hope everything works well with Public Works, because whatever they say, I'm pretty much going to have to follow suit. I'm encouraged that all your conversations are heading in the right direction. So thank you.
Ira, did you ask about electric vehicles or ADA parking?
No, I asked about electric EV spots, EV charging spots, because all I saw in that picture was ADA.
So I don't know if you actually identified on the
Yeah,
plan,
you
even though
don't.
we know that they're there.
But there are electrical
Yes.
vehicles. Okay.
Yes, so thank you. And yeah, that takes care of me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. Are there other questions for the applicant? I don't. Come on. My questions have been asked. So I don't have additional questions at this time. Thank you. At this time, we're going to open up the floor to public comment on this agenda item. If you are here to make public comment, please step to the podium, state your name, address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if you are online and have public comment, please raise your hand and you will be called upon. Are you here to make public comments?
No, we're just here to listen.
All right.
Come on up. You've been waiting
You
patiently.
can ask your questions. Please state your name for the record as well
Okay.
and address.
My name is Scott Holzer. We're on the duplex immediately to the east of this development, the very closest neighbor on any direction. Yeah. There are so many things I would like to say, but I won't. Specifically, when you talk about snow storage off-site and in the right-of-way, what does that actually mean? Could somebody show on one of these pictures where that right-of-way would be? Because I'm concerned a bunch of the parking is going to end up on our property. The overflow parking that shouldn't be there is going to be. I'm concerned that the snow is going to end up infringing on our property. So I'd be very curious to see what that right-of-way actually means, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. Megan?
If you want, I will switch to a topo. That might help a little bit.
Sure.
Just give me a second.
I guess there's no other public comment online, so you're good to answer this.
I guess I can start by saying the right of way, actually is no longer between when we wrote this and submitted it and in talking with Public Works. It feels weird to not be able to do when I'm saying this. They don't like the idea of allowing snow storage in the right of way just from a precedent standpoint. So the right of way that we were talking about was actually the right of way along Creekside Drive, along actually the far western part of the property.
Okay.
However, in further discussion with them, you can see we have a water quality pond just to the north of that driveway. And I don't know if we could go actually in the water quality pond, but the amount we need would actually fit kind of just to the left and just to the right of that pond. And due to the easement being a 25-foot setback from water quality, and we're addressing water quality within it, and I apologize to Chris McGinnis if I'm not paraphrasing this exactly right. He felt because it's not a wetland setback and it's a water quality setback, that if we're addressing water quality, we could put snow storage there. However, the final plan, I don't have yet. That's our current direction from Public Works. So it would be, yes, right in that area. Thank you for mousing.
And then just if you want to note the property lines, you can kind of see it here. Then you can see where your property is going down to the property line. So from this line right here, this way is all right of way that the town owns.
Thank you.
Is there any other additional public comment at this time? I'm seeing none, so I'm going to close the public comment portion of this agenda item, and we will move on to commissioner comments. I know that we've kind of tied our questions in with a lot of commentary as well. I'm going to have Katie pull up those kind of things that we're supposed to talk about here. Just a reminder, you know, parking, bulk plane encroachments, if that livable space can be considered for this bulk plane encroachment. The commercial element being limited down to 1,500 square feet. I'm sure I'm missing things there. It's also at the last page of the staff report.
Yes, as I get to the screen share here, just also note, also please feel free to make comments on the building as if because you do have a sketch plan and you do have the design. So staff focused in on the exceptions because we could have, but it would have been a lot to analyze the residential design standards, all of them in this building, and the non-residential because we didn't know which ones we were going to be necessarily used.
And so we have the right to say we're okay with this being used under residential building standards and not was it commercial? Non-residential, sorry. So Ira, let's start with you on comments.
Stop talking, so I
Okay, I'm
focus.
unmuted. There are, without taking too much time here, there are a lot of these issues where the staff recommends approval, and I've read through it, and I agree. I will accept everything that the staff has. I mean, the ceiling height, I think 9-foot ceilings on the first floor residentially are really nice. So I'm fine with 9 feet since we're going all residential anyway, except for that commercial space. And 9 feet in an office is fine. So I'm all good with that.
You want to break it down one by one? Like all of
Yes.
talk about ceiling height?
Yeah, so ceiling height, like I said, I think 9 feet in the
You might be
residential
able to
space
get to them
is
faster on
luxurious and nice. And since we're not doing restaurants and the like, and only maybe an office, I'm fine with 9 feet in the office. The residential in the central core mixed
I'm gonna
use.
stop you for a second, Ira. In terms of trying to get through this, like, I feel though that like it's gonna branch off though, like if you're talking ceiling height, because I think Ira and I agree that maybe the commercial element doesn't do it. So I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts?
Let's try to get consensus or like a unified direction if you can.
Well, I guess like what I'm saying though, like ceiling height to me, I don't mind the 9 feet, but I also feel like the commercial element is not adding in that vibrancy. So what is it doing?
Well, let's just talk about the ceiling height.
All right, we're gonna move directions and we're gonna go. Every comment or commissioner is gonna comment on one item and then we'll move to the next item.
Okay, so I am okay with the 9-foot ceiling height in the commercial space and the whole first floor, including the residential.
Jessica?
I'm okay with it as well. My ideal would be a vibrant commercial first floor of the entire building, but since that is not what this is, I am fine with the 9 feet. Lena?
Yeah, I am too, since it was so well explained. I'm okay with it.
And I'm okay with the 9 feet. Honestly, I'm okay with, I don't think that this commercial space is going to change the dynamic of down there that's already been done, that maybe actually residential will change the dynamic of having more people at Tavern West or whatever, or the new restaurants across the street, those kind of things. So I'm fine with the 10 feet. So residential uses in central core and mixed use districts. Ira,
I am very much in favor of the residential use. I mean, the fellow who just spoke of public comment, that's residences on the other side. So I'm fine with this building being residential in the central core in the mixed use district. And I'm also fine with the building being 100% residential.
Jessica?
Yep, I'm, again, in an ideal world, this would have a great vibrant first floor, but that is not the world that we're in today. So yeah, the residential is fine.
Lena?
I feel the same way. I wish it was a case for more commercial, but because it's workforce housing, I'm in support of ground floor residential uses on Main Street on the ground floor.
I would agree that I'd love this to be what it is, but I don't think this building would work in residential. It works here because we can use right away, we can use all these things, and I'm supportive of the residential. Mixture of uses in mixed use districts. Does the commission support reduced commercial space footprint on the property proposed at 3.7% instead of the required 20%? Ira, I think you've already spoken to that.
I think I've already spoken, and I would be fine if it was proposed at 0%.
Jessica?
Yeah, I'm supportive of that. I would like to see if there's an opportunity for that, if there's a viable tenant or whatever, if this does need to be reduced to 0, because as it's designed, it's just questionable if it's that functional. So yes, I'm supportive of the reduction, and I could go to 0, but it's begrudgingly.
Lena?
That's not what they're asking. They're asking, is it okay to
Yes.
go to 3.7?
7 is fine.
And I begrudgingly go down to 3.7. I don't like it because I think when you create such a small commercial space, it makes it even less. But I also think we're losing all the office space that exists. And if any of it is vacant there, is because it's just a really old building, but I mean, I don't see a lot of commercial leasing space in Frisco when I look. So it seems like slim pickings. So yeah, I guess I'm in support of this, but I don't want to lose the commercial component altogether.
I'm in support of it as well. I'm also think that it's not doing anything to create a vibrancy. So it's like, do we fill a bigger void by making it residential? The only way I see this adding to that commercial element is being 20%, but I know that it is hard to get people to rent at the costs here and for commercial as well. And I don't think 3.7 is going to change the dynamic down there. I think what's going to change the dynamic is people down
What's going
there.
to change the dynamic is a ground floor commercial building, which we can't have.
Yeah.
So
And so that's where I'm arguing that, is it going to do anything or is it going to hurt the building itself by having something that's never going to be leased?
I think we need to always consider the vibrancy of Main Street. This is it's the most important street in our town.
I agree, but I think it's already been established that they created that break.
As a mistake. It was a mistake. I mean, I've heard you say it on record.
Absolutely, and I agree that too, but I also hear all we talk about is having residential or affordable housing. And I personally don't think 3.7%, it's either got to be 20% or none to me on what this is.
Yeah, or higher than 3.7 to make it
Yeah.
high. Like, I feel like it came to us with like, hey, do you want this sort of non-functional thing?
Yeah, where it's
Or
like if it's
not.
10% or 15% where we've made conditional uses, I think it's still adding commercial. Where I think 3.7 is kind of laughable. Personally. All right, moving on, unless you have other comments?
No, I think we said our piece.
Parking and loading regulations. Ira,
I am in support of the off-site parking as long as the management plan is real specific, that tenants know the exposure they have to possibly being towed, that the public knows they could be towed. I mean, I as long as it's handled appropriately, consistently, and fairly, I think that's okay with me, yes. So I do support it.
Jessica?
In support.
Lena?
Um, I guess, I mean, I'll support it at this time, but with a comment that I do feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions. I don't want there to be a parking management plan that just becomes a piece of paper lost in the planning department. No offense. Meaning, you know, we base our whole decision based on all this and then that just goes away and everybody forgets about it. So whatever we have to make it so that it really is followed and there has some teeth to it and it's not just gonna go away.
And we can look at that, staff can look at that with the applicant. I believe that we had it included as a requirement in our suggestion to the applicant that we'll bring forward with the final rezoning, that the PUD is actually required to have it as an attachment. And the same thing with the car sharing program, because that way it's actually one document recorded that, yes, it could still obviously get not looked at as much as maybe it should in the future, but anyone who pulls up that PUD will have it in that document. And so we are suggesting it gets required. It gets recorded with the PUD itself. And that's why we're saying it has to get resolved and approved by Public Works before it comes back to you for a final review. So I think that if you had other ideas, let me know too, even if you think of them after the meeting. So.
I support the on-street parking in concept. Again, I'm protective of Main Street, so that's my only concern.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question on that. As we're building out like all these parking spaces on Main Street, we're seeing it with all, you know, developments that are coming on Main Street. Is there a requirement to put in not necessarily an EV charging station, but at least that basic infrastructure so that in the future, if the town wants to put in EV charging stations in these areas, that infrastructure's in?
It's a good question. I will talk to Hillary and
Because
see,
that to
because
me-
we also have grant funding going
Right.
forward with
Yeah,
those, so.
to me,
good
that would be
question.
the public benefit, not this like magical, oh, here's two more parking spaces or something like that. So that to me feels like a real benefit. Sorry.
I think all of this is a little slippery slope from the commercial to this, but I mean, the need and what I hear over and over is that we need housing. And I think that it has to be site specific though, not precedent setting. Like, you know, like I've said on record, I want to see Main Street be all first floor commercial. 20% or more, and then housing above it. But this, to me, like, this can't go into a residential and all of a sudden parking in right of ways, like, it's site specific, and that's why I'm okay with the parking here and that it's rental. If it was for sale, you would have parking problems out of the wazoo, but that there is something, but that, like Lena said, there's gotta be teeth. Like, what I hear over and over is like, oh, great, we enforce this, but or make it and mandate it, but who enforces it? And that's where we're lagging so much in this community of enforcing these problems that are impacting other people and other stakeholders in the community. And just because it's a need that we have so direly, we can't just go around town, just.
It's a balance.
It's a balance, and I think this site is one of the few sites that we can make that balance on and giving these right of ways, but.
Also, there's
I
a
don't
bus
think that-
stop
Yeah,
there.
but I think it's a little utopian when I read these narratives that we've got all this great interconnected transit. I mean, the Summit Stage is struggling, the staff people, and once an hour, and you know, I know most people who write these hop in their cars to go to Walmart, not on the stage. So I think we have to make it work. And I don't know, I struggle with work. I struggled on the last one, and that we changed the code and it's not fitting in the code. I struggle with those things, and that a PUD is a loophole sometimes. I know it's incentives, but there has to be teeth in this parking plan. Because what happens when, you know, all of a sudden, nobody's moving their cars, the snow's stacked up, we see it in Breckenridge all the time, and we've lost 2 parking spots because the snow isn't there and it's not getting cleared, so I accept it, but I struggle with it. Any other comments on parking? I know this was a big one.
Yeah, I just, as there's other options that do come up, you know, to consolidate, so we're not using like half of a block of Main Street for parking for this one development, but I think you all know that.
Landscaping and revegetation requirements, Ira?
There we go. Yes, I support their proposed reduction, which I think was explained isn't necessarily in the front, but it's, yes, I support it.
Jessica?
Yes. Or
Lena? Yes, or go. I don't know that grasses are a substitute for shrubs, but anyway, yes, support.
This I don't have issue with. I think pick things that will grow, that do well, that, make this a nice place for people to live and walk by. Non-residential developments, snow storage and snow shedding. Ira?
I'm good. I support it.
Jessica? Support. Lena? Support. I support, but obviously gonna come back on Public Works. I also argue that these rooftop decks and these ice melt systems get abandoned and not considered. And we live in a snowy area, and not having snow storage kind of dominoes into not having parking spots and all of the other things that we know. Okay, non-residential development standards, Ira?
I think, I'm okay with residential, so yes, I support the language inserted into the PUD.
So here, we're saying this would be reviewed under the residential design standards, right? Okay. Sorry, Ira, if I cut you off. Did I cut you off?
No,
Jessica?
I had a period at the end of my sentence.
this one, I have like a little more questions about, because normally you're looking at residential stuff that's off of Main Street. So why do I really need to get into the details of somebody's house? But this is actually on Main Street. And so I do think that there's, I don't know the code well enough to say this is the difference between the commercial design standards or the residential design standards. But we are writing a PUD. So I would like to see maybe something a little more robust about that facade facing Main Street. And I'll let if others here agree, there's design experts in this room that could probably come up with something.
Yeah, I support that.
I second what Jessica said. I don't want to lose for costs like that. We have to make it a nice building. I think that so much being given to this project that we have expectations too that need to be met and codes that need to be met.
Yeah.
And I think it could use a little articulation.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know, I didn't look at the articulation that much, although you're probably right, but it looks very gray, and I don't know if that's just the way it's rendered so far. I wonder if we can break that a little bit, the color up a little bit more. The, what's that called? Base, middle, and top differentiation. And I'm not married to the rock. If you have to remove it to save some money, I'm okay with it. So I know you can design a good looking building, Suzanne, so I have full faith in you, but I do want some additional language into the PUD that makes it solidifies that a little bit better.
And I think my recommendation would be in direction is probably to take the residential development standards and actually copy them into the PUD and make some alterations that make a little more that make it connect a little more into the non-residential, because I think instead of just referring to residential, that could always change in the future also.
That's true. You guys can come up with some kind of a hybrid.
That would be my recommendation based on what I've just heard you say, and I think that might give you a little better direction on how to put that in the PUD, so.
And I think we have to still stick to our high standards.
It's still Main Street.
This is Main Street. Yes, we're getting a huge need, so we're making huge concessions, but it has to look nice for the residents and for our visitors and for us. And I don't feel if we're gonna switch back into, sketch plan review, I don't feel this building would be approved by us on residential standards if it wasn't 100%. So I think to give back, and not smoke and mirrors, I'd like to see some more on the building done. The Main Street is flat. It's, it's like, if you lose the rock, can we get some more articulation in there? And I think you can do that with still saving costs, and that could move into our bulk planning conversation of like, could you do something more with the building? And maybe if we lost the commercial, we come down on bulk plan or more articulation, something that makes this building more worthy of a Main Street frontage. Second thought, yeah. Bulk plan, Ira.
I think you just,
In more particular, do you feel that the living space should be considered in the bulk plan?
I mean, there's a lot of things on the table now, because now we're talking about the residential standard. I mean, first of all, I'm not opposed to the bulk plane penetration as it is, but I'm way more in favor if we can lose the bulk plane violation by converting the commercial space. I mean, that's we kind of had in our discussion earlier. The bulk plane, I don't, it doesn't bother me that much in this particular case.
Okay.
So we changed the picture, the slide on the screen. I wanted to use the language on the slide, but the bulk plane is okay. Encroachment is all right with me if we have to stay the way we are. If we can go to residential, then we could lose it.
I don't know if I followed that last part of Ira's statement.
He said if there was like a conversion and no commercial, and those commercial units went to a unit, he'd like to see no bulk plane.
That would be a
Yes.
pretty major redesign though, right? If you guys,
We would gain 2 units.
yeah, I'm not, yeah.
That's true.
So I'm not, how the building looks, how it encroaches into the bulk plane, I do not find offensive at all. I would just say write clear standards into this PUD about what it shall be. That's all.
Lena, if these are my choices, the 3 on the screen, I guess I would go with number 1. I don't know that I want to just get rid of the whole PUD thing altogether, bulk plane altogether. I'm okay with 1,000 cubic feet per 100,000 square feet, if that, to keep it in there.
And as long as we would suggest that the applicant add language to say it's not just for significant architectural relief. So we didn't allow more, but then say you don't actually meet the requirement based on how at least staff interprets it.
Yeah.
Is what that first one's saying.
Yeah, just say what it is.
Yeah. So I would agree with that first one. That would be my vote. Recommend that they state the 1,000 cubic feet per 10,000 feet.
Hopefully you didn't comment.
Thinking about it. I'm fine with it and I would go with the first option as well. But again, I don't want to be fooled. I want it laid out in front of me and I feel like some of this is still gray. Like not having Public Works comment on this, like. Does this
Well, this
come
is sketch
back?
plan.
Yeah, does this come back to sketch plan if Public Works gives the denial?
Then if there is a significant change in the design, it has to come back. You could also require the applicant has to come back. I would, as staff, suggest you trust staff to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks. And then if we think that it's not similar enough to what you're seeing tonight and taking into the recommendations you're providing, especially hearing more articulation and a little more architectural design on Main Street, that I think staff can use that discussion. We can also contact Kelsey as the chair and run it by you if you're okay with it moving forward. And we do not need to speed this project up. The applicant wants it sped up. We also obviously needed to have a very good staff review, planning commission review. The code also requires that because it's affordable housing, we speed it up to the best of our ability. So which is why you saw it pretty quick after it got submitted. So staff can also work to keep it moving a little quicker on our end with timelines than we usually do based on, we don't have to follow the required length of time that the code requires for other non-affordable housing projects.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't think anybody here is in the interest of slowing this down. We've, our need is going up as we speak, not down.
I
So
would say my recommendation is you trust staff to make that decision as we see it, how it goes
do
forward.
you all feel comfortable with staff?
Yep.
All right. Is that our last one?
That is the last one on the list of PUD exceptions requested. Obviously, I think you gave some really good feedback on the building itself. If you have any other feedback, to
I
send.
do.
Yes.
Before I forget, and this is, in my opinion, I'll put it out there. I'm not sure if you guys all agree, but for me, this canopy that happens above on the third floor, that I feel like that belongs on the second floor. I don't know why.
Like brown.
Yeah, that I don't.
I think there needs to be a third one, like
Something.
something. And I think that those little things can add elements,
I
that-
just feel like those canopies are perfect accents of separating the verticality of the building, but like when you put it on the top floor, it's now part of it's more part of the roof. It becomes kind of,
I
don't
feel
know.
like it's missing one. Like I think that if you added
Put
one,
it down here.
but if you add in a third one, I
Or
feel like
add
it
in a
adds
third one.
more kind of breaks in a cheaper way than moving walls in 4 or 5 feet. Which I would like to see something like those where those, you know, gables are. Does that part of the building just come out a few feet? You know, like giving it some articulation. To me, this is a very, very flat building. And if it's gonna have the design or residential design standards applied to it, you gotta do better on the facade here. Is my opinion on kind of the sketch plan side of this.
Yeah, I expect we'll see a better looking building at the next round. I do agree with Lena. There's probably could be, you know, a little less gray in
Mhm.
relation to other colors as well. But I, again, have no doubt that Suzanne will design a very nice looking building.
There's something to soften it. It feels like kind of cold.
It's just like
Yes.
dark gray with
Like
light gray with gray in the middle.
So how do you guys feel? I know we're all kind of split 50-50 right now on that commercial element.
I think
Um,
since it's sketch,
But with our recommendation, like, do we say to town council, like, however makes this the most competitive product in the LIHTC front?
Well, without a doubt, the most competitive product on the LIHTC front is to remove that.
Where I
office.
feel like, do
But
we risk
is that-
losing the LIHTC funding for 3.7%? When we all would rather have 20, but we know we're not gonna see that in this. Like, I just wanna make this competitive. I mean, there's other municipalities
I
out there.
think we
fighting
respond
for
what
this.
we were, the proposal.
So we make the recommended findings to
It's
approve
sketch.
this.
What's sketch?
Yep.
So it's gotta go back to town and then back to us.
It's
for-
actually gonna go to you again before it
Oh,
goes to
before.
council.
Oh,
So
okay.
so the next step for the PUD will be submitting the final PUD rezoning. That comes to planning commission to make a formal vote and recommendation, and then town council. has
So
the
we're
final
really just
decision.
giving feedback, no recommendation.
Correct, and I think obviously to have consensus would help, but there's also always a disclaimer that the town council does have that final decision on the PUD. But they would hopefully obviously take a lot of what your feedback is and having consensus. Now, throwing in one more part, you have 2 planning commissioners who are not here tonight.
No, their
And
opinions come in.
So they may provide the applicant feedback at the final PUD that actually gives more of a consensus from the planning commission. And there's just no way to know that at this
Yeah.
point, and the town council will take that recommendation. So council won't see it until
Okay,
you see it again for.
so I think unless there's additional comments, you've got your marching orders from us, what we'd like to see at final. You know, I'm guessing it's not gonna be 20%, but. We wish you luck, I guess. Is there any final comments? I mean, I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job. Bringing an incredible need to our community. Are we getting exactly what we want? No, but is this site condition appropriate? Probably for what we're asking, absolutely. So I'd like to see personally some more articulation, some standards brought up on the building facade. And outside of that, we wish you luck and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll close this agenda item and move on to staff and commissioner updates.
First, thank you. I know that was a long one, and I do appreciate, I know a couple of you had other obligations and you skipped them for tonight. So thank you, and thank you, Ira, for being on, even though you're traveling.
I'm here. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, so staff updates. I will let you know that on this past Tuesday night, the town council did make a final appointment of your planning commission vacancy. So they did appoint Candace Day, who has more of an engineering background, and she will be your new planning commission member. She will get sworn in at your next meeting, which is the first meeting in December. We do have an item, I already alluded to it. We have a rezone modification to their affordable housing. And we are bringing it forward to you to see what you think about what's being proposed. So that is the only item though, so it shouldn't be a very lengthy meeting. And we are anticipating, due to potential quorum problems, we are hoping that we will be able to cancel the second meeting in December. Okay, that's good to hear, because we do have some applicants asking, and so I know you'll have a meeting, the first meeting in December, and it sounds like Sally has an applicant who's gonna be ready for the first meeting in January.
Meeting in December, what's the date?
Oh, 21st.
Well, I should be here.
I might be here on the 20th. No, no, I won't.
I will.
We're trying to, well, so far, we don't have anything ready anyway, is the positive news as far as holding a meeting right before the holidays. Really quick, I think you all before the meeting met our new planner, Emma Heck. So we are really excited to have Emma. She already lives in the county. She has a geography undergrad, which bias is what I also originally had as an undergrad. So we're really excited to have her in as a planner. So she just started Monday, and Sally has been training her so far and working on bringing her up to what our planner one does. She has really great questions, super smart, good background on data and environmental, and a lot of variety there. So we're excited. You'll see Emma. So Emma and Emily. Yeah. I like to keep our names confusing, especially for Cheryl. Don't get Cheryl started.
How's Granite
Coming on.
So the Complete Streets is basically wrapped up the 30% design.
Oh,
Sorry.
the
Granite Point or the
Oh,
CDOT,
the
sorry.
619.
Yeah.
So it is, as you saw, the roofs are going on. They are still aiming for a completion date, certificates of occupancy. The estimated timeline is next August. And staff is already starting to meet with CDOT. In about 2 weeks, we're meeting community development and CDOT to talk about the HOA documents, condo minimizing it, and
You decided
covenants.
who gets.
So based on gonna sidestep there for a second. We also last Monday, had James Gorham begin in our office. He is our new housing program specialist. He is taking this one on already. He's been doing all the research of the DOLA requirements that we told them we were gonna do, along with what our commitments and contracts with CDOT said. So as of now, the town has 11 units, CDOT has 11 units. The town ones are documented in some of those agreements as 100% AMI. And in full disclosure, that's all we've really gotten to so far, which is kind of a lot of us, we just weren't here for that project, some of us. And so we're not quite sure of the logistics. So James is taking the lead on that. So I can actually give you a much better.
But it's moving along
It is moving
smoothly.
along very well.
Where
Yes.
did James come from?
James came from Missouri, outside of Kansas City. We were really lucky. He is an economic development director. In his former past job. He's also had a couple of different jurisdictions, like a lot of us. So he has some good experience and background. So he is housing in Colorado is new to him, but he's so smart and such a diverse background that he's already I'm really grateful to have him in our office. He moved out here with a family. They need to find a place to live in the next 6 months. Look at me at the realtor. But yeah, so we have James, and just as a side note, we also grew in community development because we have Adolfo Vasquez, who sat in for a little bit at the beginning of this item, just to kind of listen in. He is a local Summit County graduate. He is completely bilingual, and he is our new building inspector plans reviewer. And so it is really useful having him out working with contractors because he speaks
I was
Spanish.
wondering who got pizza.
I know.
I was like, do I say? Excuse me. It was like, I'm gonna just do that, go to meetings, get some food.
He still needs to get his certifications, but he just graduated with an engineering degree. So very smart guy, and he worked his way through college in the construction field. So we're, I think civil.
Wonderful.
Different than Rick's, I can't remember them. I'm sorry.
Structural is the most logical.
I know. I should know. It's all blending together. But yeah, so we are really excited.
What that can put on the table.
So 619, how about we give you a better update in another meeting? And a reminder that December 12th is the joint work session with town council. We are going to give you an agenda ahead of time, kind of a discussion. We're gonna basically want as staff, and James is basically gonna be taking the lead on this along with myself and Emily, to bring forward, reminding you what you discussed at your last work session in May, so you know we haven't dropped the ball in anything. Also talking about where we're going with certain projects and potentially new needs assessment. And then I think we have a few other topics on the list that we were brainstorming. So we are planning on that starting at, I believe, 5 p.m. as a hopefully that helps better with work schedules, because it is
How
a
long
Tuesday
is
night.
that?
I think it will be an hour at the most.
Cause it's within their meeting.
It's the work session.
Got it.
Yep, so open format for the two, planning commission and town council to kind of reconvene on housing, get an update from staff, and also with James now being on board, really knowing that we're moving forward on a lot of things. Also on the housing front, last Friday, we put out a RFP for housing needs assessment and strategic housing action plan. Very complex in a way. We're not sure about if we'll get people who are very qualified in everything we want. We are asking for a lot in this document.
Why are you doing another needs assessment?
So we wanted to focus on Frisco in general, especially because the current one is more the low income, and we want to see more also on that missing middle and those little higher ones, if there's a need, if there's not a need. But this actually goes into how do we get to where the town wants to be? And so we put in more scenario planning, which we've talked to some consultants about, is kind of one of the newer things that they're recommending. So it's, we figure out what we have, but what we need. And then not just that, we want to actually, this is why it's a lot in it. How are we going to get there? You tell us how we get there, what we need for financing, what we need for budgeting. And so it's really taking us in a direction a step further than the current county needs assessment to focus in on Frisco.
Talking about that missing middle, I don't know if this is appropriate time. Did whatever came of like the Peak One neighborhood deed?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
What they wanted to.
Council wanted staff to pursue discussions, but they gave us direction that we could wait till we had more staff because we were so short staffed there. So Emma and James so Emma is our planner one, but she's also going to be doing the management of our existing deed restrictions. And when we get resale calculation requests and people that opt into a new covenant, Emma will be doing all of that for us in her role. So her and James are already directed to move forward with discussions to the council this winter on a few things, including one abroad, and we don't know where we're going to go, so I'm being very broad right now. A broad discussion on where you live, as far as should we continue to have the Frisco eligibility for, where you work. So if you work within Frisco, or if we need to broaden that back out to the county and or 10 Mile. So one broad discussion on that, a broad discussion on the resale calculations, which is what the Peak One neighborhood brought to council. And that will be bringing scenarios of what other jurisdictions are doing on different ones, Silverthorne and Summit County and Breck, as far as options and what they would look like. And then the other thing we are going to bring forward for discussion at town council is if we need to bring forward a lottery system for all of our teachers. It wouldn't be able to be for anyone who already has a covenant recorded, but if someone opted into a new covenant, do we want a lottery system tied to that, as the other jurisdictions are also doing? So no updates, except we've already kind of started, and I've already told them I haven't provided them information other than discussing that would be upcoming this winter for James and Emma to take the lead on.
If it's ever appropriate for us to provide input, I would have input on all of those. I won't say anything unless asked, though.
No, I think that's great. And I think that I actually had that thought, in all honesty, during the item tonight with some of your questions. And I feel like I want to almost put it on the joint work session and have everyone so the council can hear your thoughts. I don't think it'll fit in December, but I think it may be worth, if you think it's worthwhile as a planning commission, having another joint work session before it goes fully to them to discuss your thoughts on that also.
Thanks.
So, I picked up on it.
And yet, I don't know if this is out of left field or whatever, but and 6 years ago, we had that Frisco Housing Task Force that was alive for like 6 months. And I just don't, well, I guess what I'm throwing out there is I don't know if there's space for a group.
I think there's a couple of community members who have been asking the manager's office to get something like that started up. And again, I'm putting a lot of pressure on James, especially because I'm going to ask him to watch this, so he's in the loop on this item, but that's going to be something he'll be working on also. So,
Okay.
yeah. And then anything else right now on housing kind of thing? Okay, so good thing is we're moving, now that we're getting fully staffed, we're also trying to move forward pretty quick on some things that we know the town council and the community have been wanting us to undertake. And we don't know what direction they'll go, but we at least are starting to analyze and bring those up for discussions.
What are those?
What I just talked about.
Oh,
Sorry. And then Another RFP being released tomorrow is the town of Frisco is putting out our comprehensive plan and 3 Mile Plan RFP. And that's being released tomorrow for about a month to get somebody on board, where you expect the plan to take from the beginning of January until around November 29th. I think we put in there, so almost a full. We did it 5 years ago and it was pre-COVID, and it doesn't include resiliency or other things. And so we want to make it a lot more ideal to the community today.
Will it give it more teeth?
Yes. I mean, it's always gonna be a guiding document, but it can have guiding document
Like, I
that
feel
you
like
wanna
with
refer
scouting
to.
documents, like I see like the
Yes.
trails thing, I'm like, well, that's kind of silly to use it on something that's hypothetical,
Well,
like
and
that would
that's-
involve like properties, personal properties that would have to sign up on this, you know,
Correct.
so it's kind of like, I don't really want to see something like that
Which
hypothetically.
is why I pushed, so I wrote the grant to DOLA as soon as I got here to get funding, because I want us to have a comprehensive plan that not only has more state recommended things that group, things within it, but ones that we constantly hear you as planning commissioners say, why is this even in here if you're just citing it and we're not? Like, I think we're gonna have a more robust comprehensive plan. It won't be called a community plan. It will be called a comprehensive plan, and it will be a lot more robust is what staff is planning on. And it's going to have the newer staff along with Sally and Emily, because I think we're gonna have a lot more contributions to it on our end, which didn't happen with the last one. It was more just written a lot by the third party, whereas we're hiring a third party, but we have a lot more.
Yeah, some of these consultants that live in like Broomfield and stuff, you're like, I mean, our mountain communities are, you know, like snow storage doesn't fit into every community's thought process, you know, and.
Yeah, so I think the good thing is that we're doing it, and James came from redoing the comp plan himself, or coordinating that in his past, so we have a lot more staff.
Make sure he's fed,
knowledge.
caffeinated.
Housing.
Daycare, these things.
Well, we need, where is this
Yes,
daycare gonna
little kids.
go? In,
And they actually already found daycare.
oh, what? What's happened to this daycare though, and the projects that supposed to have that component
Because
of
of
part
the
of it?
funding, it's probably not gonna happen in the projects that have been already discussed. I think that it's gonna need to look at for different properties.
Got it.
Yep. That's my understanding at least. So, I know that was a very long meeting. I will,
Motion?
anything else or?
Motion to adjourn. Second.